All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name and welcome to our fourth Employer Lunch and Learn. My name is Kevin Kettleson. I'm a community development specialist with the Upper Minnesota Valley Regional Development Commission in Appleton. Have a lot of new faces on the call today, so that's great. I just want to give you a little overview of our agency if you're unfamiliar with us. We provide a variety of services, including planning, grant writing, community and economic development, and regional marketing services, among many other things, but those are kind of the big things for 5 counties in western Minnesota, including Big Stone, Chippewa, Lackaparle, Swift, and Yellow Medicine, as well as all the cities, townships, school districts, and the Upper Sioux community. Also have on the call a couple of my colleagues, Melissa Strike, our communications coordinator, and Dawn Hegland, executive director. Some of you guys may know them as well. But to today's event, one of the issues facing rural Minnesota and our region is no different, is that of resident recruitment and retention. Workforce recruitment retention is kind of the same thing nowadays. And in response to that, our organization partnered with several other regional partners this past fall, and we did a workforce summit in Granite Falls to kind of educate and share resources and topics. We had a lot of presenters for the all-day event there. Some of the topics we covered that day were workforce data and trends, recruitment and retention strategies, employer and youth connections, child care, state and regional resources, mandatory family medical leave laws, workforce housing, and resident recruitment. Like I said, it was a great day, all-day event. Had about 80 to 90 people attend. And our group wanted to kind of continue that momentum moving forward, so we decided to do these employer lunch and learns. And focus on just one topic at a time over the lunch hour so people can tune in and maybe get some helpful information. Like I said, this is our fourth one. We started these back in March. We also record all these and put them on YouTube. So if you are new to the Employer Lunch and Learn, I just invite you to check out our website. I'll drop the link to our website here in the chat in a little bit when I'm done talking, but and you can go back and check out the previous ones to see if you're interested and check them out. Also have all the recordings of the sessions and handouts from our Workforce Summit as well. So there's a lot of good information on this topic be found on our website. And like I said, I'll drop that in the chat here in a little bit. And today we're happy to have Josh Hansen-Connell, founder of Small Town Vibes. He's a product of Montevideo and Granite Falls and passionate advocate for all things rural. I saw Josh give a presentation at the Otter Tail County Workforce Summit back in April, I believe it was, and I was just intrigued by his project and chatted with him after the day and asked if he'd be interested in speaking to our group, especially that he's a former native to our region here. So he was very excited to have the opportunity, and glad we could get him on and have him present for you guys today. Before I turn things over, I just want to say that we'll have time at the end for any questions. But if you do have a question as he's speaking, feel free to just drop it in our chat, and we will get to it at the end. So with that, I'll turn things over to Josh.
All right, thank you, Kevin, and yeah, thank you everybody for having me today. As you can imagine, it's really cool for me to be able to kind of come back and share a project that I'm passionate about with the communities that raised me and the people and places that inspired this. So I will share my screen and get things kicked off. So all right, hopefully, is it showing up, Kevin? All right. So yeah, as Kevin mentioned, I'm the founder of Small Town Vibes. You'll learn more about it throughout the presentation. Basically, I loved my upbringing in Minnesota, proud Thunderhawk alum, and kind of inspired by the experiences I had, and want to make them more broadly accessible and relatable for a larger population. So goals for today, kind of 4 things. One, help share about Small Town Vibes, what inspired it, work we've been doing, and what we're hoping to achieve with it. Want to dive into kind of reframing rural recruiting, explore some topics, insights into Gen Z and millennial workforce development, retention, etc. And then really plant the seeds for connection and collaboration. This is ultimately a project that I want to be collaborative, and I want everybody to kind of see themselves reflected in it and feel a sense of ownership in where it goes. And so I hope you all feel so inclined. And we'll see how I do in making this fun and engaging. All right, so just some quick snippets, background on me.
For this year.
Graduate from Montevideo High School, 2009. Tennis, drumline, Knowledge Bowl, speech. I was one of the few lifeguards who worked at both the Monty Pool and the Kilowatt Center. So had a foot in both cities, but spent a lot of time around the area. Band concerts in Appleton, tournaments and Lackaparle High School, and really just kind of loved where I grew up, the prairie, the rivers, people, etc. Wanted to kind of point out just one little fun tidbit. The newspaper clipping there is when I was 8 years old and won the Lefse toss at the Granite Falls Ole and Lena days. It was the last time I was in the paper or prominently featured in the paper. So getting to see that feature last week was really fun for me, and come a long ways. So ultimately what I'm trying to do with this project, with Small Town Vibes, is I'm trying to activate rural curiosity and sustain rural vibrancy. This project really kind of began out of this this desire to develop new tools for developing, for building and sustaining rural wealth, so that rural communities over time could continue to be vibrant, thrive, support all of the things that I took advantage of and appreciated when I was growing up. So how we got here. In January 2023, I received a fellowship through the University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management, where I was getting my MBA. And basically the fellowship gave me the opportunity to start investigating issues of rural economic development, see if I could develop new tools, strategies, resources for building and retaining wealth in rural communities. That over time evolved into this concept of talent tourism, which is really predicated on the belief that I loved my experience in Montevideo, Granite Falls, but a lot of people that I meet in the Twin Cities have several misconceptions, prominent misconceptions about what rural is. When I share the, word rural, first things that come to mind for people is cornfields and cows, that it's basic and boring, and why would I move there? I don't want to be a farmer. And I was doing a lot of course correcting of these kind of prominent myths about what it meant to live in a rural community, and kind of over time really got this passion for or had this idea that if I could bring people back to Montevideo, if I could take them to Jake's Pizza, if we could grab a beer at Talking Waters, if I could show them Fiesta days and get them on, candombe drums, or spend an afternoon on the river, that it really would change their perceptions and they would maybe start to see it the way that I see it, which is a place that's really vibrant, diverse, exciting, inspiring, and so on. So throughout that research, I did a number of discovery interviews, over 50. Don was actually one of them. So thank you, Don, for being a part of this process, and hope you're excited to see where it is today. And throughout that process, got connected to Otter Tail County in northwestern Minnesota. They bought onto the idea and were kind of my first partner in developing a pilot of what we ended up calling Small Town Safaris, which is this kind of experiential learning trip where I bring a group of people from the Twin Cities to a rural community for a couple of nights and really show them all of the opportunities, introduce them to people, all of that stuff. Throughout the summer, we continued to build towards that pilot, do some format. We did a couple of lunch and learns, webinars, things like that, just kind of see what are the inflection points, what are people's motivations, concerns, etc. with moving rural. And ultimately in September, we were able to lead our first safari to Otter Tail with 12 fellow MBA classmates. The result of that was a really positive experience. Among all 12, we showed significant growth in significant improvement in their perceptions of rural, growth in their like motivation to visit, invest, and potentially move to rural. And so with that success, it inspired kind of continued collaboration. And we ended up signing on Otter Tail as our first kind of official member in January of 2024, and filed as an LLC. So since then, we led a second safari in May with a smaller format. That was really successful, and we're continuing to work with Otter Tail throughout that. And then, summer, I'm working on a Min Cup startup competition right now to refine Small Town Vibes concept, get some of those like foundational elements shored up, and hopefully win some funding to take this even further. So I want to start with some perspectives on rural recruiting. Just some things that I've observed, things that people have shared with me, struggles, challenges, so on and so forth. So first, just a slight content warning. This is a mildly exaggerated account of what rural recruiting looks like. So hopefully it's not too offensive if you see yourself or your recruiting strategy reflected in this. You're not alone. This is kind of the same process that everybody's going through and everybody's struggling with, and why I believe Small Town Vibes can help. So really, current recruiting is what I call kind of the 4 Ps. Post, set up the job on LinkedIn, Indeed, things like that. People scroll through it, you send it out into the ether, you pray, you hope that the right person sees it at the right time, that they happen to be looking for a job, that they know that your community exists, that they already have some kind of desire to move rural. And then we pout when it doesn't work out, right? Because I wouldn't be here if we were successful. So ultimately, this is kind of the common experience that a lot of people are faced with. And, if you happen to have a high margin business, you might have a little bit of money to promote, but you kind of still end up in the same place. One of the things that I think is really, really missing from kind of the rural recruiting tool belt is our most effective, most prominent asset, which is people. And I think when we think about rural recruiting, we often go to cost of living comparisons, accessible outdoors, all of these great things that are possible through a rural lifestyle, which is great. And those are the things we absolutely need to lean into and embody in our conversations and messaging. But ultimately, every experience that I've facilitated, the number one takeaway from attendees is that the people were the most motivating part, right? I think we under leverage this asset, that people in rural are humble, they're easygoing, they're relatable, they're funny, they're, just nice to be around, right? We care for each other, right? We look out, grocery store catch-ups, people food baskets when somebody gets laid off, all of these things. But that's not what people get to experience through the current recruiting process. You don't get to see that through a job board, right? It's not accessible in videos and social media posts, right? Getting a real human interaction in 3D, that is what we need to create more opportunities for. And so with that is the recognition that there's a lot of barriers to this, right? Person first recruiting is largely inaccessible under kind of current constraints, right? It's really resource intensive. So if you think about the costs of sending a staff member to a career fair, you have to register for the career fair, which is often $500 to $1,000 just to set up a table, right? You have to pay for their food, their lodging, their transportation. You have the opportunity cost of, you know, taking them off of their work streams for the day, or, you know, et cetera. It's really resource intensive, and not a lot of companies can afford it, right? It has low return on investment, and it's risky, right? Even if you go, you get 10 resumes, you bring them through the interviews, you maybe even bring them out to visit. There's no guarantee that they accept a job when it's offered, right? And so that 1,000 to 5,000 to, you know, X number of dollars you invested in, you know, recruiting that candidate, all of a sudden that's gone, right? And it's a sunk cost, and there's no recuperating it. Um, Three is kind of the lack of training specialization. For a lot of us, recruiting is kind of a secondary, tertiary responsibility, which means that it's kind of the first thing that gets deprioritized or dropped off the plate. And we don't get a lot of time to train, hone our skills, things like that. And the reality is that recruiting is not necessarily it's not for everybody, right? Like recruiting, going to a career fair, doing this in-person engagement, you have to be out in front of the table. You have to be kind of charismatic. There's a lot of kind of improv, friendly, all of those things. And so if you're reserved, or if you're not comfortable doing that, it's really hard. And I tell you, you know, I go to all of these career fairs, and regardless of if it's a Fortune 500 company or a mom and pop, you know, startup, a lot of people are just really bad at recruiting, right? There's a lot of people, they send out, you know, somebody from their engineering team or somebody that doesn't specialize in recruiting, and they sit behind the table, they're looking at their phone, they're not, you know, smiling or, you know, making eye contact with people, and they don't get a lot of conversion. Whereas what I do with Small Town Vibes is stand out in front of the table. We have really colorful, attractive materials, make eye contact with people. I don't let people walk by without some kind of smile or, you know, recognition. And I have a really high conversion rate. You know, at the last three career fairs I went to had over 200 signups, which dwarfs kind of what I saw from other tables. And the last thing, kind of barrier in our way, is that current recruiting strategies put us at a competitive disadvantage, right? You think about posting a job on LinkedIn or Indeed, Monster, ZipRecruiter. It'll have the job title, it'll have a salary, it'll have maybe a couple job, you know, bullets about what the responsibilities are, things like that. This heavily biases large companies from urban centers, right? They have brand recognition. They can afford higher salaries. Their benefits are more attractive. All of these things that the reality is like, as rural employers, we don't have the ability to provide as high of a salary, right? We have lower cost of living, right? You can afford more with the salary we provide. But that's not what candidates are thinking of when they see it, right? They see the salary, they sort, okay, I want the highest salary, the lowest salary gets my least amount of effort. And they don't think about what lifestyle that job or opportunity or salary is making possible, right? So a lot of this is about, how do we shift the script? How do we refocus the narrative to prioritize the things that rural does better, and the things that rural can do that urban can't, right? You know, not sitting in traffic for 2 hours, missing your kids' baseball games, right? 5 minutes to a lake or outdoor access, right? Property values or property prices where you can actually afford a backyard, whereas in the Twin Cities, you'll be paying double that for a 1-bedroom apartment, right? So it's about that, and really making sure that like what candidates see first are the things that rural does better and make rural a better fit for them. And so the possibilities with all of this that we can start to develop and innovate and experiment with, one is creating scale efficiencies, right? So that resource intensivity, part of the problem is that we're all operating as single employers or single communities, right? And we're trying to recruit for a specific job at a specific point in time. And that's really difficult to do, right? It's difficult to get all of the resources, budgets, all of that stuff together. And so if we start collaborating, if we start sharing resources, sharing contact lists, rosters, you know, get 5 companies to go in on a table together and only send 1 representative, all of a sudden these things become much more affordable and they become more attractive to candidates, right? I'm more effective in these recruiting fairs because I'm not just representing a single company, I'm representing Otter Tail County, I'm representing greater Minnesota, right? And so a candidate knows that in approaching me, I have a potential match for them, whatever their career background is, whatever their lifestyle opportunity thing is that they're looking for, right? So it's low search cost, it's obvious, it's easy, it's accessible, right? And we can reach that efficiency if we kind of partner and collaborate. 2 is improve candidate lifetime value. So one of the things is, if I'm a rural hospital, I invest in bringing 3 doctors out. Ultimately, I only have 1 position. All 3 are great candidates. I just have to pick one. I give them the job. The other 2, they go back into the sea, right? And that's a lost investment. This approach, we can partner as communities. And if you invest in 3 candidates and there's another hospital, we can send those 2 candidates that you didn't hire to the other hospital, right? We can increase the odds of quality candidates finding fits by sharing resources, by sharing leads, all of these things, right? And that's kind of what Small Town Vibes wants to become, is kind of this this facilitator, this collaborator, so on and so forth. 3, collaborate with specialists. Again, as I said, recruiting is not everybody's cup of tea. So really finding and identifying and investing in those ambassadors that can represent rural in a positive, attractive, magnetic way. And then 4, as I kind of alluded to, is shift the focus, right? On a generic job board, urban opportunities win 9 times out of 10, right? The higher salary is kind of the only thing that people focus on because that's the most prominent thing featured. But when we start to shift the focus to affordability, to the imagery, the people, all of those things, rural has better chances, right? Rural wins more often when we shift the focus. So again, just kind of looking at traditional recruiting versus talent tourism, messaging, the focus in traditional recruiting is on the job, salary, title, benefits, description. Talent tourism focuses on the lifestyle, right? You can't replicate a rural lifestyle in a city environment, right? That's only possible by living in a rural community. And so by focusing on that and then figuring out what career, what job can we match them with to make that possible, we have more success, more possibility. The interactions, traditional recruiting, you're often limited to just job boards and social media. Talent tourism, we bring real humans into the equation, right? Real humans that you can't ignore. They're much more memorable. And really, at the end of the day, it's the people that keep people coming back to rural. Audience, traditionally, you're really only limited to those who are actively job seeking, and honestly, those who are already aware of your community, right? If I go to Indeed and I am looking for a welding position, my only option is really search the entirety of greater Minnesota, or I can filter for communities, but then I have to know the name of the community, right? If they don't know Montevideo, or if they don't know Granite Falls, there's not a way for them to filter for those results. And oftentimes those results will get deprioritized because urban employers can pay to advertise, to promote, to advantage their positions. Whereas talent tourism, the thing that we're really working towards is these lifelong relationships, right? So not only are we reaching active and aware candidates, we're able to start engaging passive candidates, right? Somebody that's not actively searching, but they just had a kid, right? And maybe they'd be open to a rural pivot if we reached out to them, if we were proactive in reaching out to them, right? And so it's really about how do we develop these relationships that make people more accessible, over time so that we can increase the odds of matching them with great places and great opportunities. And then finally, reach. The thing that we're trying to do is extend the reach, right? Basically, as a community, we're kind of limited to the number of followers we have and the number of followers they have, right? So Twin Cities, a big advantage in this regard, right? 2.5 million people in the metro area. Their message is going to get a lot further, a lot quicker. Whereas we're kind of capped by smaller populations and smaller followings. But if we start to aggregate these opportunities, aggregate the, collaborate, all of these things, then all of a sudden we take Montevideo as a community of 5,000 to 6,000, and we start representing it instead as Greater Minnesota, which is a community of 1.5, 2 million, right? And so those are kind of the things that we're looking to create with talent tourism. Sorry, it kind of keeps skipping on me. And again, just kind of a reminder, traditional recruiting advantages urban, right? Talent tourism, doing some of these innovative experimental strategies, advantages rural. So time for a convenient small town vibes commercial. So what we're left with in traditional recruiting efforts is we have kind of a tourism budget, we have an recruiting budget, we might have companies that have an HR department and then they have a marketing department, right? We send out a lot of messages, we put out beautiful commercials, sunset photos, Instagram posts, all of those things. And if I'm a candidate and I see one of those, one, it's really easy for me to scroll past it in the moment and forget about it. And two, even if I do see it, how do I get to that next step, right? How do I find somebody that can introduce me to the cool restaurants in town, right? How do I find somebody that's going to make this community more accessible? And so what we really need to start doing is adding steps in this engagement pipeline, right? Targeted engagement. How can we activate their rural curiosity? Take people that have never considered rural and really put rural on the map for them in a meaningful way where they want to kind of continue experimenting, exploring, looking into rural opportunities. Small town safaris, getting people to our communities, I think is a really big part of the strategy. And what that does is, one, it makes rural real, right? It makes rural accessible. It creates positive connections, all of those things that make people want to maintain a lifelong relationship with your community. But it does something, it does something else as well, which is it really creates this magnetism to the process, right? When people see their friends going on these small town safaris, when they see small town safaris promoted on Instagram and other platforms, they start to think, that looks really fun. How do I get involved in this process? And from that point, we get their email, we get them plugged into our roster that we can reach out to, that we can engage, that we can kind of control the flow of information to and from. And then finally, really creating this optimized matching, right? So not only finding active candidates when a position comes up, but being proactive about like anticipating who's going to be hitting transition stages at what time, right? Who's going to be a great fit for this community? Who's maybe not actively looking at this position, but we could train them into that position, right? And ultimately, I think that's going to lead to much more conversion over time. And just in case you want to see what this looks like, you can scan the QR code. That was kind of our most recent small town safari experience. And again, really what this does is it puts people, it creates walking billboards, right? We send people back to the Twin Cities wearing their, in the case of Ottertail, they all got Ottertail t-shirts. I see those people wearing those Ottertail t-shirts all the time. They ask me, when can I get back? Josh, can you find a way to send me back? Their friends say, hey, can I get on the roster for the next one, right? There's all of these things that are creating this, gravity, this pull towards this recruiting process that is much more attractive than kind of traditional methods. And so as far as what the talent experience looks like, it kind of starts with the discover phase, me going to a career fair, me going to community events, right? Putting rural on the map for them, making rural impossible for them to ignore. Then creating opportunities for connection. One of the things I like to do is host happy hours in the Twin Cities, webinars, rural kind of video viewings, right? Make things that are low barrier and easy to access so that people can come, grab a beer, explore, and then concentrate the population so that rural communities can access them a little bit more easily. Visit, join a small town safari, and then ultimately kind of what happens after this is kind of all of these intangible benefits, right? They spread the rural gospel, right? They start to consider rural more genuinely, right? They return. Maybe they don't move right away, but in the short term, they, come back to Granite Falls on the weekends, right? They think about Lac Aparl State Park as a place to camp and explore, right? They're coming back and they're reinvesting in the communities that invested in showing them a positive experience. Maybe they buy a vacation home someday, all of those things, those intermediate steps. And then ultimately, some of these people we're going to have match potential with, right? We're going to hit them with the right message, the right opportunity at the right time, and we'll start to get those conversions. And so what does this look like? This is some of the imagery, right? It's fun, it's engaging, it's attractive for people, all of these things. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the narrative away from finding a job. We want people to find a vibe, right? We want to focus on kind of the feeling, the atmosphere, the things that rural makes possible that city living can't replicate. I just want to do a quick shout out to John White Photography. For those of you that don't know him, he's a fixture on Meander, local artist, and does some of my favorite photography from the area. So all of this sounds great. I know I've kind of put a really glossy picture together. So does it work, right? The reality is that only time will tell, right? We're still in this prototyping experimental phase, but really it's promising, right? With the September Safari, we saw significant growth in people's perceptions of rural, right? They had a really great experience. Their perception changed positively, and they're likely to return. Some of the testimonials, this proved that living in rural Minnesota doesn't mean you won't have access to great job opportunities. One of the people at Arvig shared a story about how they were always commuting from the Twin Cities to Otter Tail. It was a 3-hour drive every weekend and things like that. And at some point it clicked when they were, stuck on 94 during highway construction. It's a hot day, all of that stuff. And they just want to get to the cabin. What if I just lived there, right? What if I took the commute out of the equation and I just lived there? And this life that I keep trying to escape to on the weekends, what if that was my day-to-day reality? And then obviously people, right? They went fishing with Eric Osberg, which if you haven't had a chance to meet Eric, he's really fun, charismatic, great guy. They got beers with local residents. Common perception was, I couldn't believe how funny Marie was. I would go back to Otter Tail just to hang out with Marie. All of these things. That's what we're creating, right? That's what we're making. That's the imagery. That's the perception that we're transforming. This is what people are thinking about when they think about rural. And so some of the takeaways from kind of this experimentation, again, biggest thing, people were the biggest motivator, right? As great as fishing on the lake was, as great as, beautiful as the sunsets were, as tasty as, the food was, it was the people that really drove the experience, right? So again, all of this is about creating those those real human connections, those relationships that will kind of stand the test of time and are much more, magnetic, much more attractive, much more motivating in transitioning a person to rural. Slow down the pace. A lot of people are motivated by opportunities to give back. Featuring kind of diverse companies with diverse career ladders and things like that kind of starts to make people realize that they don't have to be a farmer to appreciate and move, start a career in rural. And then they had a lot of follow-up, right? From the 12 MBAs. Honestly, that was the pilot, right? We just wanted to figure out what's the itinerary, can we host people, what do people want to do, all of that stuff. We weren't expecting immediate results, right? We weren't looking for conversions and things like that. But out of that, we had 2 follow-ups. They applied for internships, right? Significant interest in property, right? Looking into, hey, how much does a cabin cost out here? All of those things. All of those things happened from that first trip, and that wasn't even the goal, right? And so it is working, right? Like we're getting these conversions, we're getting people to consider rural in a meaningful way. And these are MBAs at the University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management, right? They're looking at Fortune 500 jobs, right? Like that is their only focus. And we took them off of that career path for a little bit and got them thinking about, can I work at KLM Family Brands? Can I work at RVIG, right? Because this sounds really great. So with that, that's kind of my commercial on small town vibes. That's kind of talent tourism. That's what we're doing in a nutshell. And so one thing I know I kind of wanted to speak to as well, or at least give some people an opportunity to reflect on, is Gen Z and millennial workforce strategy. I know this is the workforce of now and tomorrow. So talent tourism is great, right? But that's not going to get the job done on its own. We really need to have practices, policies, programs, et cetera, in place to recruit and retain Gen Z and millennial talent. So one of the first things to know with Gen Z and millennial talent is honestly the expectations are relatively similar to Gen X, baby boomers, etc. Right? The top 5 priorities are the same across all age groups. There's slight differences in terms of their ranking of those top 5, but a lot of survey data shows that what works for boomers works for millennials with some slight caveats, right? So basically, if I'm going to break this down, I think when it comes to Gen Z and millennial retention, engagement, recruitment, it really comes down to kind of involve, inform, and adapt, right? You need to involve your Gen Z and millennial workforce in the day-to-day like operations and decision making of the company, right? Give them a look behind the scenes, give them opportunities to influence what's happening, let them experiment with new roles and responsibilities. That's going to be really motivating to them staying around. Inform. The expectation nowadays for workers is that is transparency, right? They know what's going on. They know what the company's commitments are, that their values are. Information is easily accessible, all of that stuff. So informing your employees and, facilitating transparency as best as possible is going to go a long ways. And then adapt, right? Look at ways that you can experiment with kind of your traditional employment models to learn, right? To put new things into place, to give your workforce an opportunity to try a 4-day work week, to see, to be motivated by the potential of a sabbatical, things like that. And so 3 pillars. Impact. Gen Z and millennials are much more impact driven. And that doesn't mean necessarily like, hey, we have to, donate 100, 20% of our revenue to charity, right? That's not what it means. What it means is, can your workforce consistently embody the sense that like what we are doing is good for people, right? If you're producing candy, know how that's making people happy. Know how that's like, creating positive childhood memories, all of these things, right? And then make sure all of this, your mission, vision, values, if you don't have those prominently posted throughout your website, that should be up there. You should make sure that your Gen Z and millennial talent know what they are, that they believe in them, and that you're creating opportunities for them to kind of experience them themselves. Impact committees, and then really look at like, what do we make possible? Versatility. I try to get the terminology away from, there's a lot of literature about flexibility, right? 4-day work weeks. They want flexible work hours. They want potentially like 30-hour a week jobs, right? They'll take lower pay in exchange for these things if it means they can travel more, if it means that they can you know, go on retreats, things like that. So flexibility is a big factor, but really I think it ultimately comes down to like versatility, right? How can we create a workforce that's really like modular, where people can get new experiences, right? They can spend a year in one role, transition to another role, right? And it's fluid, it's flexible, and they feel like they're always growing and gaining new skills. And honestly, doing that, giving them opportunities to take a work hour to do an Instagram takeover, things like that, that can add value in unique ways that you maybe don't have capacity for otherwise. And then mentorship. Big thing that people want to see is, how is this career experience contributing to my future goals, right? Gen Z is entering the workforce expecting to have 5 different jobs by the time they're 30, right? And so the more we can kind of lean into that, create opportunities for them to explore, give them exposure to people like them, not necessarily in the same career path, but maybe, you know, partnering with other people in the community so that they have somebody that they can get regular exposure to, ask advice from, so on and so forth. All of that I think is going to go a long ways in terms of our recruitment and retention. And so the last thing I'll leave with is, make sure that with all of these investments, all of these considerations, if it takes longer than 10 seconds to find it, it doesn't exist, right? Make this stuff really prominent on your website, make it in your employee materials, make sure that it like slaps somebody in the face every time they open up a document, a web page, a post, so on and so forth. And that's what's going to kind of start making inroads with improvements in workforce retention. So I'll leave it at that. I've got some resources that I'll send out after the presentation if you want to dive deeper into any of these, but hopefully just kind of planting the seeds for consideration and exploration. And with that, I'll just say thank you so much. Again, this was a huge honor to be back here and share about a passion project for me, and some things that I think we can do to really make the places and people I love more accessible and more relatable. So yeah, I'll end there. And if we have a moment to chat with whatever time's left, I went a little bit longer than I intended, but would love to hear some chat and questions right now. But if you have thoughts, messages, or ideas, etc., please send me an email, text me at my phone number. And yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Anyone have any questions or comments after that? It's always kind of a quiet group during lunch hour, but if anyone's brave enough,
no,
just go ahead and take yourself off mute and comment or ask a question.
Yeah. I see you in the chat, Carmen. Good to see you.
Oh, you have a question here. So from Carmen, are you looking for us to partner with your organization for potential employees?
Yeah. Yes. So the end state, right, is I want to support communities, employers in sourcing talent, right? That's kind of what this effort is aiming towards. That's kind of the cherry on top of the sundae. Really, I think it's about aligning all of our efforts and investments in other areas to drive toward that result. But yeah, I want to help companies figure out ways to get quality candidates, to consider them to move out to rural. So yeah, but biggest thing is, you know, right now we're still in that prototype experimentation phase. So as much as I can kind of invite collaboration, shared kind of experimentation, it's still kind of a boutique solution at this point. So it's really, you know, the only thing limiting it is our imaginations, right? And so, you know, have a chat, see what we can kind of put together. You know, I can put together customized solutions, proposals, so on and so forth. But really just keeping the conversation going in the relationship, you know, advancing is the way I'd like to move forward.
Yeah, maybe I don't know if you'd be willing to share kind of how things worked in Otter Tail as far as who are the partners involved and what role each group or individuals had, with just kind of so
Yeah,
they can
yeah.
maybe start thinking about what it might look like in our region, or if someone's interested.
Yeah, and so what we did with Ottertail is Ottertail County Lakes Country Association. They bought a membership, which actually kind of acts as like a retaining fee. That helps pay for my time, me going to registration fees, attending career fairs, managing the website, all of that stuff. In exchange for that membership, that retainer fee, that kind of keeps me focused on our Otter Tail, right? How can I solicit engagement from businesses? How can I drive talent toward Otter Tail? How can I develop kind of new engagement opportunities that feature Otter Tail? All of that stuff. And then really what we're trying to do is we're trying to get these small town safaris organized, right? These in-person experiences. And those are developed in partnership with employers. So for example, in May, we did a safari with 4 students. We partnered with KLN Family Brands. If you've heard of Wiley Wallaby Licorice, that's their brand. And so KLN kind of sponsored the trip. They paid for the incremental costs, the lodging, the food, transportation, all of that stuff. And that's kind of how we partner to make these experiences possible. And then obviously, as far as who attends the trips, I look within my roster, my network, try to as best as possible to make sure that they're relevant to KLN job opportunities. So KLN, had actually opportunities across the board, but people that were interested in sales positions, people that were interested in, market development, HR, things like that. And that's who I focused on sending. But ultimately, we're just creating a great experience, something that feels really good and that they want to bring back to the Twin Cities, share with their networks, and kind of, yeah, plant seeds for spreading the rural gospel.
Yeah. And then maybe too, as far as the small town safari, given a more detail on what that looks like, I think you would share so like half a day, a whole day, and the morning, and they're on their way, but just kind of the itinerary of the day.
Yeah.
Of the
Yeah, and
weekend.
I'll make sure I have a separate folder kind of with sample itinerary and things like that. And so I'll make sure to share that with you, Kevin, and you can send that out to everybody. But yeah, kind of our typical itinerary is leave on an afternoon right around 3 or 4, drive out to well, I'll just kind of continue to use Ottertail. Drive out to Ottertail, go to a happy hour with local residents, grab beers, have a good time, enjoy ourselves, go to wherever we're staying for the night, have a bonfire, do something like that to kind of wind down, really kind of relax into the rural lifestyle. Then the next day, might wake up with, coffee and sunrise, go somewhere, maybe my Montevideo example would be go to Java River, get on a kayak, see, sunrise over the water, things like that. Then whoever our partner employer is typically hosts us for a visit, a tour, and lunch. So they can kind of start to see, behind the scenes, all of the things that make these companies operate, the diverse career opportunities, be impressed by, investments that they've made. And then it's really about afternoon. We'll try to find some kind of, if they're golfers, get them on a golf course. If they like fishing, get them in a fishing boat, right? Really kind of curate it to whatever their interests are so that they can see how their passions are possible in a rural community. Yeah, and then dinner, cocktails again, another bonfire, stargazing. And then morning on the third day, wake up, grab a breakfast at a local spot, and return home. So it's try to keep it simple. Let our conversations evolve organically. Really focus on the relationships and the experience. And yeah, that's what it looks like.
Thanks. Any other questions from the group?
Well, hey, I just want to say again, huge thank you. Please reach out if you have thoughts on where this is going, or if you heard something from the presentation and you're like, that won't work or that will work, or I'm excited about that. Would love all feedback, positive, negative, constructive, etc. And really, I hope kind of people can kind of contribute to the evolvement of this product and service, and we can see, create a sense of shared ownership. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Josh, for joining us. That's a very interesting and unique work you're doing, and it's great to hear more about it today. Like I said, I will make a recording of this, send out the link, as well as the slides and any other information that Josh might have for you, as well as a kind of a quick post-event survey. You can provide any feedback. If there's a topic that you'd like us to cover in future webinars, please let us know. We can look into finding another speaker in the future. I know we have one tentatively planned for maybe late August, early September on the issue of childcare. So be watching for that as the weeks progress in the summer. If there are no other questions, thanks again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your summer. See you, everyone.